Hi, I'm the classy version of me, and we're going to talk about this show. Let's get it. It's been a while since I reviewed a show like this. I typically have stuck to the sci-fi shows and whatnot, and Marvel shows and all. But I was a major fan of Downton Abbey. Some of you might even remember my parody reviews of Down Ass Abbey.
One horsepower. Hipsters. All right, baby. What we say? Get that money. Ooh, yeah. We like this. Whoa, just sneaky ass. Hold up. Y'all want a brother to marry his cousin? Nah, man. Whoa. Yeah, damn, I hate how skinny you look. Huh? Why would you? You know, I'm just tripping. Oh, shit. What's up? Y'all just in time for the Soul Train. Yeah. Hey, yo, look who here. Soul Train line. Oh, yeah. That's them red. And hit this. But y'all know I'm gonna hit that.
I might have to bring those back. But I find something extremely hilarious about a guy that grew up like I did having an affinity for period dramas based on class, wealth, those kind of things. But I've told some friends I call these kind of shows the Playbook because even though most of them are fictionalized representations of that time or whatever period in time they're covering, um, they are putting the on full display the actions of people, the thoughts and machinations of human nature. If we pay attention, we learn and know how to navigate the world a little bit better. I've got some notes because I got a lot of thoughts and I got to keep them in line. Okay? This is a classy show. A classy show. We are talking about the Gilded Age. Now, the Gilded Age was not meant to be a compliment. When Mark Twain first wrote about it, it was actually, if you think about it, something that is gilded is iron, brass, nickel. It is of a lesser quality underneath, and it is covered with a very thin veneer of the finer quality. 24 karat gold is deep. It's the whole thing. Um, but something that is gold leaf or gilded is, it's lead underneath. It's not the real thing. And so that was the impetus of that name, is that this was an age of show. It was an age of immense and extreme wealth that was rapidly begotten. Um, Very few people established a foothold in the ultra wealthy, and the majority of everyone else was just scraping by. There are a lot of parallels to today. I'd say, with not the dot com, but if you look at the current tech boom, a lot of that wealth is very, very similar to the Gilded Age when a very few people, very few amount of people, amassed extreme wealth based on this sort of turn of the century technology. And that's exactly what happened back in that day. It's post-industrial revolution coming from England. Lots of cross Atlantic traffic, people coming here to make their fortunes, live a better life, get some kind of opportunity. And a lot of the people that came over here early, pre-revolution, established a foothold in what was initially a Dutch colony. And so, New York actually was New Amsterdam. And so the powers of the day um, had their transplants land here. Obviously, we know what happened with the native peoples. I'm just going to be talking about this show. So please don't misunderstand and think that I don't understand that. But in the context of this show, I feel like I had to lay a little bit of the groundwork to understand that this was actually a very short period in time between Civil War and then World War One, turn of the century, brand new country. Everything is still expanding rapidly, and those who kind of had the foresight to get in on some things were able to establish monumental wealth. Now, that's not to take away from the fact that these were savvy, smart, innovative people, mostly men. Let me give you another caveat. I'm talking about this show, and the show is keeping it 100% real. There were no women's rights at the time. So, as we discuss this, keep that in mind that these are not my views. This is history. And we're going through a period now where history is trying to be rewritten and shirked. I think we need to see it and know how it happened to have a better understanding and then how to move forward. But anyway, the show is specific to New York City. Uh, Late 19th century, early 20th century. For those who get confused by those numbers, we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. Turn of the century. We're not talking the Old West, but most of the country still was being established. At one point, George Russell in the show talks about Sandusky having the foresight to see that Ohio was going to be manufacturing and all of those Great Lakes territories were going to be expanding and shipping. Most of the money was in that. We hadn't yet gotten to movies, radio, those kind of things in the public sphere. We're talking shipping, trains, steamboats, all that kind of stuff. That's where the money is coming from. Um, so, in the context of the show, there are two main families that we're talking about. There are others who will be talked about on the edges of these two main families, but they actually put these families right across the street from each other. So we're talking like some high class Hatfield and McCoy stuff. We have the Van Rhines, old established guard, and then we have the Russells, new dollars, new money, new dollar bills, fresh and crisp. You know what I'm saying? Again, not a modern problem. It's not a new thing. Old money, old establishment, old influence versus new money who can often foot the bill but don't have what society would call the training to be polite gentlefolk. It's super bizarre. I'm intrigued. I've always been intrigued by this time period and time periods like it. Industrial Revolution, Gilded Age, Belle Epoque of France. Um, all of these times are so formative, and I think my intrigue comes from the fact that, for the most part, in large part, someone like me would not have been able to participate, not at the level that you're seeing. That's not to say that there weren't those who did. There was actually notable peoples of color, of different backgrounds who amassed wealth and had their own society. But in terms of what gets historically noted, it was rarely either shown, or even in the show, they do a great job of showing that a black family that has money and some influence could play the part and run parallel to main society. But in the instance that they came up against main society or mainstream, they would have to step aside. That's in the next episode. We'll talk about that. But it's hard to watch. But I love that they kept it somewhat truthful in this fictional context. That it was really like that. It was really like that. Okay, so on 61st Street, the Van Rhines and the Russells live across the street from each other. They peeping through windows at each other, doing the sneer campaign. One family is older. One family is younger. One family has a decent amount of money, but major influence. The other family has obscene amounts of money, and no influence. Um, I would say this is a time, but I think that lasts. That's human nature. Again, shows like this are the playbook for me. They are a study in human nature, and that is something that never ever changes. Those that have money often think they could buy their influence, and there are those who know that, so they keep the door shut. Now, eventually, those two sides start getting closer and closer together, in a sense that you'll hear in this show. But it is a contentious bringing together. So there's lots of fireworks before the melding happens. They do keep it very, very truthful to history. They mention the Astors, which is a very famous family out of New York. The Astors, hence the name Astor Place. If you've ever been in New York, you'll hear these names for their landmarks and the things that they contributed to. But they mentioned them. They mentioned the Vanderbilts, the Morgans of JP, as in JP Morgan, the financier, and they mention these names to give proper context and attach them to some reality, some real life things that happened in history, to give credence to the story that they're telling. The Russells and the Van Ryns are fictional, but there are families like them. Like, for instance, I believe the Russells are very close to the Vanderbilts. The way that they portray them, George Russell is a shipping magnate who has just begun his takeover of railroads in and out of New York City, and moving west through the Midwest. And then the Van Ryns, I'm trying to think of who they were established on. There were some older families. The Astors are actually in the show. They have their matriarch is in the first couple of episodes, and it's really interesting to watch how she rules the entire roost of society. Again, brief history lesson. Society, in quotes for a reason, is not the general term as we use it today. It was a very, very protected term, meaning a very select few of families and people who were considered to have the right breeding, the right upbringing, the right factors involved. And it wasn't always money. The money backed it up, but the circumstances were even deeper than that. And Mrs. Astor went as far as to make a list of 400. It was called the 400, a list of 400 families or 400 people who were involved in society. Now, this is an older, much older notion coming from across the ocean during imperial and colonial times, mostly imperial though, where you had the court, and the court turned into society. So polite society is the full term that was often used. If you were not a member of polite society, you were riffraff. So even with money, obscene amounts of such, the Russells were still riffraff. People would not call on them. They would not come to their house for parties. It's wild, okay? It's wild to watch this happen. Oh, I should note, the creator of this story, the writer, is actually the creator of Downton Abbey. So he's kind of giving us an American version of Downton Abbey, possibly a condensed time frame. And a side note, he was actually on a show. He was an actor himself. He was on a show called Monarch of the Glen. So he's kind of in this realm. He kind of knows this, and he's a lord himself, in the British sense. So this is his bag. So as the story picks up, as it mostly does, you're often picking up with a lost sheep or a black sheep to introduce you to the families, because as a writing mechanism, you cannot jump straight into something that most of us do not know or have no context in. So this character becomes an avatar for the audience. It's necessary. You see it in every single period drama. Your entry point is someone who maybe not completely unsavory, but definitely not in the crowd. In Downton, you're looking at the chauffeur, you're looking at some of the downstairs staff. Um, in Mr. Selfridge, it was a similar way. He himself was the outcast because he was American, and even though he was rich, he was not afforded a place in society, in polite society in England. There's often that black sheep quality on the entry point. So Marion Brooke is who we are introduced to, and she is getting some bad news that her father straight up lied. They did not have loot like they thought. They don't dive into it. I think mainly because they want to develop that story between her and her aunts, who did not speak to and did not like their brother, and he did not like them. He squandered the family fortune, cheated them out of everything. They had to fend for themselves, but I'll get into that. So Marion Brooke is finding out that she is little Bo Peep's lost sheep. So Bo Peep lost sheep right here is talking to her lawyer, who has waived his fee because she is flat broke. She has to appeal to her long lost aunts in New York City. Well, that's where she, upon getting her train ticket and she's about to go to the city, she bumps into a Miss Peggy Scott. Now, Peggy Scott is AKA Educated Sister. She is well educated, well spoken, and for the most part, actually well to do. I appreciated this. I appreciated that the introduction of a black character was not a slave, was not a criminal, was not someone down and out. It shows that much of what we are told about our own history is either missing or false. There in the North were very well to do black men and women and black families. And as I said, the mixing of black families into mainstream society did not happen. It was still a very rough time. It was still a very unjust time. But that is not to say that we did not have. Over the decades in the modern era, obviously things were changed. Things were taken away. Things got worse before they attempt to get better. But in this depiction, coming out of the war, out of the Civil War, and pre-World War One, there were affluent black people who were making a way in publishing, making a way, maybe not in shipping and rail because there were monopolies on that. But when you talked about maybe goods and services, there were quite a few that had shops or had services. And it was good to see this. And that's where the introduction of this comes in because Miss Peggy Scott, educated sister with a little bit of change in the purse, actually has to help Marion get her ticket to New York because her purse is stolen. Money, ticket, everything. She's on the bench crying, and then pretty soon they're on the train. They do show the difference in class as the windows are open, the cinders are blowing through in that particular car where the black patrons are sitting. But she's thankful nonetheless. We're off to New York City. Planes, trains, and automobiles to New York City. Okay, so once they arrive, that's when the shenanigans ensue. And you'll have to watch the show because I'm just doing a pretty scant review of it to set it up because that's what this episode was. It was mostly the setup to get you into the characters. So we meet George Russell, tycoon, robber baron of shipping and trains. We meet Bertha Russell, who, despite her name, does not look like a Bertha. I found that interesting. But they got some old timey names. Okay. Bertha is the ladder climber. Man, she is unlikable. She is unlikable. But that's what I do like about this show is the way they introduce you to characters has you pick a side almost. And you very quickly gravitate toward that side. But then they do something that is a redeeming quality. So you find yourself vacillating between, and then you just have to ride along with the show because no one is all good, no one is all bad. Everybody has ulterior motives and then redeeming qualities. Yo, that's madness. I love this. I love this. Okay, so you're introduced to the Russells. I won't get into the kids because right now they're not factoring heavily into the story. But Bertha Russell is all about the ladder climb. Now you think her husband would be the ambitious one, and you'll find out that they make a really good team. But she is the one who is ditching her old friends, and he even says like, you should invite some of the old crowd to come visit. And she says flat out, I don't want my old friends. I want new friends. I'm like, yo. Oh my gosh, she's dirt balls. But anyway, they built this big obscene mansion that nobody will come visit because you gotta be in. Just building something big is just like having nosy neighbors who will peep you but not say hi, not come over, not be a part or invite you to be a part. It's so modern and sickening to see that things don't change. Human nature is what it is. So across the street, you at Auntie's house. Sup, Auntie? How you been? How you doing? I'm here from Pennsylvania. Holla at your girl. We arrive at Auntie's house. We have Agnes Van Rhymes. She is the head in charge. She's running things and she lets you know it right off top. Like, don't step out of line. This my ish. And then we have Ada. Ada is the more meek of the two sisters, obviously younger by a good stretch, and not nearly as salty as older sister. Now, being an oldest sibling, I completely get Agnes. Like, devoid of money and rank and influence and all that, there's a class system even in your own home. Being the oldest, you bear the brunt of everything, good and bad. Mostly bad, because you get the you should know better, you get the why didn't you do this, you're older than them, you this, you that. And you can definitely tell that Agnes had to be the shield for Ada. She had to protect her and take care of her. So Ada's a spinster. Ada doesn't have any prospects right now. Agnes, when their brother sold off and squandered all their belongings and then split with the family, the girls were left with nothing. The parents passed, and so Agnes had to marry well. She had to go looking for loot, and she had to endure whatever it was to set the family up. I think there's going to be more of her story told, but she is definitely the acerbic one. She's salty. She'll tell you what's on her mind. Everybody has that auntie. That's auntie. The rest of this time, her name is Auntie. Now, Ada's an auntie too, but Agnes is auntie. Woo. That's the setup of the show. That's where we're at. We go through a few things that introduce some characters and get them in a situation where intermingling might be possible, but it is not granted. And that sets up the tension that just because you have means does not mean you are welcome. And that's what they're going through. It's a little more clean cut on the gentleman side of things because that's about money and business, and it is often unemotional It's often pretty straightforward, and I do, as a business person, I'm not saying I would go the route of these men, but I definitely appreciate the moves that they have to make to protect money, to protect businesses, to protect legacies. Um, it was a cutthroat time when monopolies were actually allowed, and so a lot of this money from the robber barons was amassed through extreme monopoly, like the game. So we pick up a little bit of George Russell doing his business, and talking to some aldermen, which are the like city councilmen of the day, figuring out how to make a few moves and set some things up. And you have, again, like I said, no one is all good or all bad, but you definitely have an appreciation for how he moves. In particular, there's one negotiation that I loved, especially as someone who has to write proposals and estimates and negotiate my fee with people. There was one particular point where he goes, I'm just going to build a new line versus renting or buying track from this other company. And that owner says, if you do that, it'll ruin me. You would much rather pay the exorbitant price of building your own than to use an already established line. And he goes, yeah, it's going to cost me money right now, but when I put you out of business, it's going to save me more money in the future. And it's not that I really want your company or I want your company to go out of business, but I need to teach everyone else that my offer is to be understood, that there will be no second offer. There will be no negotiations. I will negotiate once. If you refuse me, I will end you. Respect. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how many times I've felt like that. There's definitely been a few times where I've had to say that. Firing clients, breaking with others. Sometimes you just gotta protect home base. I respect it right now. But anyway, that is the gist of the first episode. It is a setup episode. It's a little bit longer than most. It's actually like short movie length. But because they have to advance the story, they actually go pretty deep into some details. I'm skipping over a lot. That's just the very basics of it because I do want you to watch the show, and then we can talk down in the comments because there's lots to talk about. So if you have watched The Gilded Age, let's get to it. Let's discuss. Other than that, you need to be on this show. It's the Playbook. And since I'm picking this up, I'll be adding a lot more things to this, what I call the Playbook. We're talking Bellamy. We're talking Downton. We're talking the Paradise. Upstairs, downstairs. And oh, I forgot to mention that. We actually do get a little flavor of the downstairs crew, the house crew, of the butler and the maids and the housekeepers and the footmen. We get a little bit of that. And that's going to be coming in the next episode. So we'll talk about that then. But add this to the Playbook. It's legit. I appreciate you coming through. We'll talk soon. Peace.